Hello. I'd like to thank Fedora Gadfly and the Atheist Gamer for requesting that I respond to this young lady. And I'd like to thank Hot Chicken Meat and Thomas Quinn for requesting that I respond to this young lady. Like I said, I have a long-ass request queue at this point, and for all I know you could all be the same person, but nevertheless this, ladies and gentlemen, is how you kill 4 birds with 1 stoner. Now, I'm going to do something a bit different. I'm gracing you with my head for the sake of the intro, but after that you will not see me. It's something of a circus this time, so think of me as a sort of ringmaster. Yes, take that where you will. Slosh it around. Feel better? Now spit! So yeah, I thought I'd challenge myself. I thought I'd make a little game out of it with a few simple rules. Instead of the usual routine of taking one YouTube video and splicing it together with my response to it, take 2 YouTube videos, 2 YouTube channels, take each of their most recent videos, and splice them together so they look like they're responding to each other. It's what I've done here. You might call it relation clipping. Who will you clip? I've clipped these 2.
Hey, y'all.
Alright, let's go.
It doesn't have to be their most recent videos, but that's what I did, and I managed to keep them both in time order. Didn't have to move the end to the beginning or repeat any sections or anything.
The first thing that I was thinking about talking today was the rhetoric in social justice community.
Everyday feminism.
Again, you don't have to get that achievement, but it's an extra difficulty level if you fancy it. And an extra layer still would be if you can do it without cutting out any clips at all, not even little ones. I couldn't quite manage that. I did trim some fluff out, but I caught most of it, I think.
Spend any time in these communities, you will see the same words over and over and over again.
How femininity and the norms surrounding feminine appearance are self-enforced and held in place by all of us.
You basically just have to get it looking as though you might as well be channel hopping between the 2. It's sort of reminiscent of the John Cage style of artistic noise. If you put a bunch of radios on stage and just switch them on, that counts as music. Or indeed, if you play a particular amount of nothing, that counts as music. Well, being the fidgety fellow I am, I've taken that idea and run with it to a place where I am at least making an effort, figuring out how to crossfade and beat mix and so on.
So I hope that we can put some distance between ourselves and these norms.
Here are some of those words, just name a few. Problematic, tone police.
Not to say that we should stop being feminine or adhering to the norms that we want to adhere to.
Trigger warning.
But just recognize that they're part of a larger system of patriarchal discipline.
Patriarchy. White supremacy.
I would consider attributing this composition in part to John Cage as an insubstantial but tributary nod, but Mike Batt did that once, and John Cage sued him, claiming silence is John Cage's intellectual property. So fuck John Cage, and fuck Mike Batt anyway. I don't even know what I'm doing here. Anyway, yeah, it's fun, try it. Take 2 videos, preferably 2 people who are supposed to be arguing for the same cause, and put them in a John Cage. Clip them together so as to demonstrate the argument they would have.
And hopefully help us stop policing each other.
Deconstruct.
According to these norms.
Marginalized. Things like that.
So,
Kind of see them over and over and over again that they almost lose meaning.
You know, I never would have thought of this if it wasn't for the large request queue I have now. As they say, necessity is the mother of invention, and spontaneity is the father. I have a camera clip of a randomer and a camera clip of another randomer, and they don't call me Dr. Random Account for nothing. They pay me. So yeah, this is it, ladies. Open wide.
analogy starts with an idea from philosopher Jeremy Bentham, and he was not talking about femininity or any of that. He came up with the idea of an ideal prison, and the ideal prison was called a panopticon. So the panopticon is a prison with cells built around a central watchtower. So there's one watchtower in the center and all the cells are around it, so the person in the watchtower, the guard, can see in at all times to every prison. And the prisoners know that there's a central watchtower in the center, they can see that, but they can't see if there's someone in there. So they just have to assume that there's someone watching them at all times. And it seems that all you need is the belief that you're being watched, and you'll self-monitor. So that's why the prison is so effective, because no one has to actually go in there and enforce the rules on these prisoners. They just enforce them on themselves, thinking that if they don't, this guard will come because he's watching.
You can't call something problematic without being more specific or qualifying it in some way.
And this idea was then taken on by another thinker, Foucault, and Foucault believed that this was a metaphor for modern society more generally. So he thought that not only prisons, but all hierarchical structures in society like the army, schools, hospitals, factories, all of those have evolved through history to resemble this panopticon. In other words, power initially and used to be imposed from the outside through violence, but now this process has been internalized and people impose these constraints on themselves.
Is it racist? Is it sexist?
So, now feminist philosopher Sandra Barkey takes the panopticon from Jeremy Bentham and Foucault's reading of it and applies it to femininity.
How? How is it problematic?
Barkey says that women self-police and commit themselves to relentless self-surveillance due to living in a patriarchal society.
That happens with a lot of these types of words, and people start to get really lazy because in their head they might know what they're talking about, but it's hard to articulate that to people who don't know the language of the community.
So basically a panoptical male authority, the guard in the panopticon, it lives in the consciousness.
So in a way, social justice communities aren't being very accessible,
she thinks.
Which is problematic, to use a word.
We're constantly viewing our bodies through the eyes of this anonymous patriarchal other, the guard.
Because accessibility should be a goal of feminism. We want equality for all people.
And if we really think about beauty norms, they're completely impossible, unattainable.
So that means we need to reach people who might not have the tools or the language or the education or the access to the same resources that we have.
It's not that there are specific people, it's just...
The critique is that feminism relies too heavily on identity politics. We kind of blame when somebody doesn't understand something on their identity.
Other women, it's men, it's the media, it's all of that. It's coming from everywhere, but at the same time, it's coming from ourselves, from no one else. So, because the male gaze is something that we've all internalized,
it's just so clear how different perspectives are like correlated to our identities. It's hard not to always revert back to like the identity politics mindset. But I guess I do think
she thinks
sometimes it goes too far.
There's no need for a formal authority, like a panel of men, to enforce these norms.
And where I would draw the line is
this impression that gender norms are natural.
Are we recognizing these identity politics?
Or that they're a complete voluntary choice that we're making, and that there's no other reason that we would do these things.
In order to break them down, or are we reinforcing them? Because the goal of feminism is to not have these identities define us.
So, but it's important to realize that we are taught to think about our bodies as objects to be gazed upon and decorated, and that there is always someone else judging us and viewing our bodies, and this is something that we've internalized, so we self-regulate.
And we really do need to pinpoint the differences before we can start breaking them down. We need to be conscious of them. We can't be colorblind, or we can't just say, like, we see men and women as exactly the same, when it's like, they're not in this culture.
According to that.
And before we can really start to treat people equally, we have to recognize how we're not treating them equally. It's like, what are we working for if we don't even know the problem?
It's also important to remember that these aren't realistically norms that we can all just shake off. I mean, femininity is a practical requirement for a lot of women to move through a patriarchal society. We can't escape this judgment. Even if we were to shake it from ourselves completely, there would still be pressure coming from all around us.
So that's where identity politics comes in handy.
We're judged by our size,
And checking your privilege,
our speech,
claiming your identity,
our movement,
those are really important.
even looking our own age. So because in this society we're perpetually being seen and judged by men,
You can start breaking things down.
by other women, and ultimately by ourselves, it's as if we live in this panoptical prison, and in the center is this patriarchal other that we've all internalized.
Not everything is because of somebody's race or somebody's gender. A lot of it can be.
So when you think about how femininity impacts women and how we police ourselves, it's clear that femininity itself and the norms surrounding it are part of a larger system of discipline, which is patriarchy.
So maybe we need to start changing the language that I think checking your privilege is a really useful tool, but it also is not getting through to a lot of people.
I don't want anyone to think
And people take offense to that.
I'm saying to stop wearing makeup or any of that. I just want us to think more critically about the norms that we're adhering to and why it is that we feel the need to do those things.
Putting yourself in these categories and claiming your identity isn't denying yourself of all the complexities of your personality beyond that.
But when I look in the mirror, I can't help but feel like I will look better if I put it on,
We're all individual human beings,
or something like that.
and each of us are going to have many, many ways that we defy our identities. But we're also going to have many ways that we're going to fit into it because that we've lived our entire lives like that.
This idea that I'm even being looked at, that is even an important thing to think about, is something that I've internalized growing up in a culture that tells me I'm here to be looked at and I'm here to be decorated.
So maybe we can change the language to be more engaging for people. Instead of like, check your privilege, we could say something like, how do you think your identity has affected you?
So it's very hard to shake.
I think our behaviors, our outlook, and our perspective, those are all heavily shaped by our identity. Beneath all that, beneath all the noise that like interacting with people and society and the media, confusion that causes in us,
But I think it's an important thing to talk about.
there's this core aspect of our personalities, our values, and who we are. And that's not shaped by our identity.
And this analogy really helped me better understand how these norms work when there is no explicit authority forcing them on us.
We need to straighten the surface level stuff out so that we can all connect on this deeper level and share in an equal and just culture that values people and values love and empathy and respect and compassion. So,
Okay, now, I said I wouldn't come back, but one important thing. The girl with the music and the purple background? Okay, the hot one. That's the point, actually. You may leave this video finding yourself strangely in love with that girl. Trust me, no. I did that with the editing. It's all in your mind, and I put it there.
So hopefully this was helpful. If you have questions about it, put them in the comments.
if you disagree with love and respect and compassion and empathy, then
I put a crane fly in a jar with a bot fly, and now you think crane flies are beautiful. No. No. And no, I do not think women are flies. I think feminists are stupid. Goodbye and just fuck.
I'll see you next Tuesday.